Well, we hear the first reading from the prophet Malachi, and he is speaking on behalf of God against the priest, the Jewish priest at that time, because they are not offering the right worship to the Lord. It didn't tell us in the first reading, but the problem was that we read before, we see that the priests were getting among the animals, those who were sick, those who were blind, and those who were sometimes even were stolen. And those were the animals that they were offering in sacrifice to God. So the sacrifices were not pleasing to God. And if that's what they were offering to God, the prophet is telling them, if that's the way that you treat God, how will you treat your people? That's the reflection that if you don't have the right relationship with the Lord, you're not going to be taking care of your people. So he's inviting the priest to have that change of heart. And he's threatening them that God will curse them if they don't do what the Lord is asking of them. So the blessing of God comes when we do the right worship, to look for the Lord, but also to be present to those that God has entrusted to us. That's the right worship that the Lord wants to see. Then we hear something very similar on the gospel. Jesus is talking about the scribes and the Pharisees who had taken the seat on the chair of Moses. The chair is where you teach. You teach from the chair. So they have taken the power of teaching. But the problem is that they are teaching their own ideas, not what is coming from God. They are confusing people because everything what God, according to them, what God cares is that everyone fulfills the law. So they have imposed all these burdens on people. And for God, what is precious is the human being. So the laws are for the well-being of the human being. So the human being is first. So that's the mistake that they are making. And the problem with them is that they are so narcissistic. They are looking at themselves. And when you look at oneself, you forget about God and you forget about the others. So that's the danger. Perhaps when you hear of someone who is narcissist, you know that the person is looking at oneself only. There is the story of Narcissus on the Greek mythology, that he was a young, handsome man, and he was always looking at himself on the water, on the pool, in a clear water. So every time that he was seeing himself, he was telling himself how beautiful he was. And then there was a time that he said that he was so beautiful that no one was like him in the world. So he fell in love with himself. And when he bent to reach to see his face and kiss his face on the water, he fell into the water, into the pool, and he drowned himself. So he was paying too much attention to himself. And sometimes that's the danger, that when we just care about oneself, then we forget about God and the others. So that's the danger. Another thing that we see here is also the danger of pride. People who have power, sometimes they want to bring their own ideas. And that's what we see today, like what is happening in Israel, Gaza. Those who have power sometimes making decisions without considering the suffering of the people. When there is hatred, when there is pride and they follow their own ideas, then they impose heavy burdens on people. So all these people who are suffering because of the decisions of those who were in power, the suffering of war, very sad situation. So that's the danger also in those who have power, who sometimes make decisions and the people are the ones who are suffering. So we have to be very careful with pride as well. There was a story about the lion. He decided to go into the forest and make his rounds and to make sure that he was still the king. So he goes to the bear and he says, "Who is your king?" And he said, you are the one, you are the mighty lion. And then he goes to the tiger, and he raises the same question, and he says, who is your king? Oh, you are the one, mighty one. And then he goes to the elephant, and he raises the same question, who is your king? The elephant got him with his trunk, throw him against the trees, got him again, throw him against the ground. And then the lion says, don't be mad, it was just a question, So sometimes it happens to us that we don't get it. We might feel so important, but everything that we have is a gift. God is so generous to us. And I repeat it often in my homilies. The only things that belong to oneself is sin. Anything else is a gift from God. All the goodness that we have is a gift from God. And we have to acknowledge that. And I think that was something that they were forgetting. The scribes and the Pharisees were forgetting. They received everything from God, and they were to use everything that they had for the well-being of the people. The other danger that we see as well is that they were just looking on the outside. They were caring about the phylacteries. That was like a cord with the who was the Lord, and what the Lord was asking of them that they were putting in their hand. So they were tying it to their hand. And it was a small size, but they made it a big size so that everybody can see, that they had the law there on their hand. And then the tassels, the child, they were making them bigger, so people can greet them and can praise them when they see them on the street. The high priest also, when he was wearing a Flavius Josephus, one of the historians, he said that when the high priest was on the street, it was like they were seeing God, walking on the street. We have to be very careful also, because it's not the external what is important to God. What is important to God is what is inside of us, what is in our hearts. That's what is important. On the 5th century, there was a danger also, because there were some priests who started wearing differently so they can be acknowledged by the people. So Pope Celsus I, he wrote and he told his priest, and he said, we are not to be distinguished by what we are wearing, but we are to be distinguished because what is inside of us, the care that we have the people, the good works, what is in our minds, that's what is important, and that's what we are to care for. So what is in my mind? What is in my heart? What is the driving me? Is the things of God, are the things of God, or what is there? We are to ponder what is in our hearts. What is it that God sees? And then sometimes we might feel also like the scribes and the Pharisees, because sometimes we introduce our own ideas into the Christian community. Sometimes, for example, we can be driven by legalism. All what matters are the commandments, the law. So we are to do that. And then if someone makes a mistake, he's not welcome in the community. So that's one of the dangers. But what is important to God is the human person. Before any law or regulation, is the human person what is important to God. And we have to keep that in mind. The human being is important. There was a priest who was telling me that when he was traveling, somebody asked him, and he said, so are you a Roman Catholic priest? And he said, yes, I am. And he says, so you are the one who are imposing all these rules that you get married, you are not supposed to divorce, or that you cannot have a relationship before marriage, you have to wait for marriage. And he said, sometimes they identified it by the rules and all the rules that we have. And I responded to this person, he said, I told this person that what really matters is God. He loves us. And He loves us so much that all what He wants is the well of the human being. That's why sometimes He asks things of us. because it's for our well-being. That's why God asks of us and demands of us what is good for us. And that's who God is. Sometimes the temptation is also that we sit on the chair of Moses also to teach some of the things that might be in the world. Some ideas that we get out there. Sometimes from the social media, there are many, many things, the influencers that we see in our society today, they're giving us new ideas. And if those ideas are different than the ones of Christ, the ones of the gospel, well, that's not what Christ is teaching. So we are to be very careful not to bring those ideas that are against the teaching of Christ. We have to be careful not to bring them into the community. Because sometimes we say, well, this is what everybody says. This is what everybody does. We are to embrace this. So we need to be careful with those ideas that are out there and just to follow Christ. And that's what Jesus is telling us in the gospel today. We are not to listen to the scribes or the Pharisees. We are not to be like them. That's what he's saying. We are to be like Christ. That's what we are called to be. We are the followers of Christ. And that's why he's warning the Christian community. He says, do not call anyone teacher, because only one is your teacher. But Christ is the one who teaches the way. We are all brothers and sisters, but he is the one who is the master, the one who teaches. But we are to live. So we are to see each other as brothers and sisters, but always listening to Christ. He is the one that we are to listen. And then he says, don't call anyone on earth Father, because only one is your Father. The one who is in heaven is our Father. What does it mean? That nobody is at the level of God. There is only one God. And if we are the children of God, we are to resemble the face of God to other people by doing good works, by treating them with dignity, with respect. We are to resemble the face of our Father because we are his children. And then lastly, he says, do not call anyone guide or master. So only one is the one who is our guide, Jesus. He's the one who is guiding us, telling us where to go. We have to walk the same steps of Jesus. And that's why the gospel is ending, saying that anyone who exalts himself will be humble, and anyone who humbles himself will be exalted. What does it mean? That we are to walk the way of Christ, serving, loving, doing what is good. And sometimes it might take us to the cross. We might be crucified, too, rejected, but we know what comes after the crucifixion, the resurrection. We find life. We are to walk with Jesus and not to forget who we are. We are Christians, the followers of Christ. Gandhi, he used to say, I believe in Christ, but yet I haven't seen a Christian. That's what he said. Well, I think he was wrong, because there are many good Christians that we have in our community. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, many others that we have. So, and they resemble Christ. We are to resemble Christ. So may the Lord give us the grace that we resemble Christ by the way that we love and treat one another. Amen.